Welcome to English Stories Journey. Listen, relax, and grow your English with every story. It was a quiet morning in the village of Longbourn in Hertfordshire. The sun shone gently, and the birds sang in the gardens. Inside the Bennet house, however, Mrs. Bennet was full of excitement. "My dear Mr. Bennet," she called, entering the library where her husband was reading. "Have you heard the news? Netherfield Park is rented at last." Mr. Bennet looked up calmly from his book. "Is that so?" he asked, a small smile on his lips. "Yes," Mrs. Bennet replied, her voice rising. "A rich gentleman has moved in. He is single, very wealthy, and has no children. One of our daughters must meet him immediately. Imagine the happiness it could bring." Mr. Bennet put down his book and raised an eyebrow. "You are always so eager to marry off our daughters. Why don't you let them meet him first and see what they think?" "Because, my dear, this is an excellent opportunity. Mr. Bingley is handsome, rich, and well-mannered. It is every young woman's dream to catch such a gentleman's attention. Jane, in particular, should meet him at once." Jane, the eldest Bennet daughter, quietly entered the room. She smiled politely, sensing her mother's excitement. "Mother, I hope Mr. Bingley will be pleasant," she said softly. "Oh, Jane, you do not understand. A gentleman like Mr. Bingley is very rare. You must be charming and gentle. If he notices you, everything could change for our family," Mrs. Bennet exclaimed. Elizabeth, the second daughter, listened from the doorway, amused by her mother's anxiety. She knew that her mother often let her imagination run wild. Mr. Bennet finally shook his head with quiet amusement. "Well, we shall see how charming you can be, Jane. Perhaps I will pay a visit to Mr. Bingley myself and make the first acquaintance." Mrs. Bennet clapped her hands with delight. "Oh, do, Mr. Bennet, go at once. You will make a most favorable impression for us all." And so, the news of a new, wealthy neighbor at Netherfield spread quickly through Longbourn. The Bennet family buzzed with excitement, preparing themselves for a visit that could change their lives forever.
Early the next morning, the Bennet household was already full of excitement. Mrs. Bennet, still eager about Mr. Bingley, could hardly sit still. "My dear Mr. Bennet," she said, appearing in his study with a bright smile, "you really must go to see Mr. Bingley at Netherfield. It is the perfect opportunity for one of our daughters to make an impression." Mr. Bennet, leaning comfortably in his chair, looked up slowly. "Indeed? And which daughter would that be?" "All of them, of course," Mrs. Bennet exclaimed. "But Jane must be first. She is the eldest and the most beautiful. You must speak to him on our behalf. It is so important." Elizabeth, who had been listening, smiled quietly. She knew her father enjoyed teasing her mother, and he certainly did not like being rushed. "I see," Mr. Bennet said calmly. "And how should I introduce myself? Perhaps I should deliver a speech about the fine qualities of our family." "Oh, you need not exaggerate, just make him like you," Mrs. Bennet insisted, clapping her hands. "You are so clever, surely you can make him notice Jane." With a quiet chuckle, Mr. Bennet put on his coat. "Very well, I shall go, but I shall go alone, in secret. I like to make a proper first impression without your enthusiastic commentary." "Alone?" Mrs. Bennet gasped. "Oh, Mr. Bennet, you must not leave it all to chance." But Mr. Bennet was already walking out the door. "Fear not, my dear. I will return with news that may delight you or amuse us both," he said with a wink. True to his word, Mr. Bennet visited Mr. Bingley quietly. He found him polite, friendly, and full of good humor. By the time he returned home, the Bennet family was eager to hear about the new neighbor. "I have met him," Mr. Bennet announced casually. "He seems quite agreeable, and I believe he may visit Longbourn soon." Mrs. Bennet nearly jumped with joy. "Oh, Mr. Bennet, that is wonderful. Now Jane can make her impression, and perhaps one day we shall see her married to a rich gentleman." Elizabeth watched the scene with a smile, thinking that her father's quiet humor and her mother's excitement were always in perfect contrast, one serious, the other dramatic. And so the Bennets waited eagerly, imagining what adventures and intrigues might begin with Mr. Bingley's first visit to Longbourn. The long-awaited Meryton ball finally arrived. The Bennet family prepared with great excitement. Mrs. Bennet was certain this evening would change their lives. The assembly room was bright with music, laughter, and dancing. When Mr. Bingley entered, he immediately caught everyone's attention. He was handsome, cheerful, and spoke with kindness to everyone. Mrs. Bennet's eyes sparkled with triumph. "Look, Jane, he smiles at you. He has excellent taste already," she whispered. Indeed, Mr. Bingley asked Jane for the first dance. He danced with her again later in the evening, and the whole neighborhood agreed. He admired her greatly. But the arrival of Mr. Bingley's friend, Mr. Darcy, created another kind of excitement. He was taller, richer, and finer than anyone else in the room, but his manners were cold. When people tried to speak to him, he answered shortly, as if conversation was a waste of time. Mrs. Bennet declared loudly, "He is the proudest, most disagreeable man in the world." And soon, everyone agreed with her. Elizabeth, however, did not care. She was too busy enjoying herself, laughing with friends and observing others. But her opinion of Darcy changed forever when she overheard him speaking to Mr. Bingley. Bingley, in his warm way, urged Darcy to dance. Darcy replied, "She is tolerable, I suppose, but not handsome enough to tempt me." Elizabeth laughed at the insult, telling the story to her friends later that evening with great amusement. But from that moment, she decided Mr. Darcy was the most unpleasant man she had ever met. Meanwhile, Jane and Bingley's smiles and gentle words created a completely different impression. The Bennets left the ball certain that love, or at least hope, had begun for their eldest daughter. The morning after the ball, Jane and Elizabeth sat together, talking about the evening. Jane's eyes shone softly. "Mr. Bingley is so agreeable," she said. "He is lively, charming, and dances so well. I think he is the kindest gentleman I have ever met." Elizabeth smiled. "And he danced with you twice. That speaks louder than words, Jane. He clearly admires you." Jane blushed, but shook her head. "You always see more than there is. He was simply polite." Elizabeth laughed. "Polite? He hardly danced with anyone else." "No, Jane. He likes you. Even his sisters seemed pleased with you." Here Elizabeth grew thoughtful. "Though I cannot say the same for Mr. Darcy. He was the proudest man in the room. He barely spoke to anyone, and insulted me most rudely." Jane, ever gentle, defended him. "Perhaps he was shy, or not comfortable among strangers. You should not judge too quickly, Lizzie." Elizabeth raised her eyebrows playfully. "Shy? No, Jane. His pride stood taller than his head. But never mind. I would rather laugh at his arrogance than waste time being offended." The two sisters laughed together, one hopeful and romantic, the other sharp and amused. They did not know how much their first impressions of Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy would shape the days to come. The Bennets were not the only family who enjoyed talking about the ball. At Lucas Lodge, the neighbors were also full of opinions. Sir William Lucas, a cheerful man who loved society, declared, Mr. Bingley is the friendliest gentleman I have ever seen. His dancing was excellent, his manners were easy, and he smiled at everyone. Lady Lucas agreed. Yes, indeed, and he danced twice with Jane Bennet. I believe he already admires her. Charlotte Lucas, Jane's sensible friend, smiled. Jane deserves his attention. She is beautiful and sweet. But we must wait and see what happens. Men sometimes change their minds quickly. The conversation soon turned to Mr. Darcy. Sir William tried to be polite. He is very fine, very rich, and he certainly has the look of importance. But Lady Lucas shook her head. Importance? He was the proudest man in the room. He spoke to no one outside his own circle. Elizabeth, who had come to visit with her sisters, laughed. I can confirm that. He refused to dance with me and declared I was not handsome enough to tempt him. What better proof of his arrogance? Charlotte looked thoughtful. Well, pride is common among the wealthy. Perhaps he has good qualities too, hidden behind his manners. But one thing is certain. He will not make friends quickly in Hertfordshire. Elizabeth nodded with a smile. Then let us leave him with his pride. We shall enjoy Mr. Bingley's company instead. And so the neighbors agreed. Bingley was delightful, Darcy was proud, and Jane Bennet might soon have an admirer.
During the next weeks, the Bennet family often met Mr. Bingley and his friends. Bingley's admiration for Jane was clear to everyone. He always chose to speak with her, to dance with her, and to sit near her. Mrs. Bennet was already dreaming of wedding bells. It is almost certain, she whispered loudly to her neighbors, Jane will be Mrs. Bingley before the year is over. Elizabeth, though happy for her sister, was not so quick to believe. She shared her doubts with Charlotte Lucas, who listened with her usual calm good sense. Jane likes him, I think, Elizabeth said, but she hides her feelings. She never shows more affection than politeness. What if he cannot see how much she truly cares for him? Charlotte answered wisely, Jane must be careful. Men do not fall in love unless a woman makes it clear she returns their admiration. If she hides too much, Mr. Bingley may think she is indifferent. Elizabeth shook her head. But Jane's modesty is part of her charm. Surely he sees it already. Charlotte smiled. Perhaps. But Lizzie, I am not as romantic as you are. Happiness in marriage is always a matter of chance. If Jane has the opportunity to secure a comfortable life with such a good man, she should not risk losing it. Elizabeth laughed at her friend's practicality. Charlotte, you would marry a man for security even without love? Charlotte answered firmly, though with kindness. Yes, love may come later, or it may not, but a good position and respectability are not to be refused. Elizabeth, ever romantic, could not agree. I would rather wait for real love. Without it, marriage would be only a bargain, not happiness. The two friends smiled at each other, knowing they would never entirely agree, but their different views on love and marriage would soon matter more than Elizabeth could imagine. The Bennet sisters were soon excited by new visitors in the neighborhood. A regiment of officers had arrived in Meryton. Their bright uniforms and lively manners quickly made them the center of attention. The younger Bennet girls, Kitty and Lydia, could talk of nothing else. But for Mrs. Bennet, the greatest excitement was still Mr. Bingley. When an invitation arrived from his sisters for Jane to dine at Netherfield, she saw her chance. My dear Jane, said Mrs. Bennet with great satisfaction, you must go on horseback. The road looks heavy with rain, and you will be forced to stay the night. What better opportunity to make Mr. Bingley admire you even more? Jane protested, gently. Mamma,
It is not polite to expect such things. If the weather grows worse, they will think me troublesome." "Nonsense," cried Mrs. Bennet. "This is the best plan in the world." And so Jane set out on horseback. The clouds grew dark, and before she reached Netherfield, the rain was pouring down. By the evening, she was unwell, her head aching and her body trembling with fever. The Bingley sisters insisted she stay the night. A letter was quickly sent to Longbourn, informing the family of her illness. Elizabeth, always devoted to her sister, was not satisfied to wait. She said, "I must go to her. If she is sick, she needs me." Mrs. Bennet tried to discourage her. "But my dear, you cannot walk all that way in the mud. You will arrive with your hair untidy and your shoes dirty." Elizabeth only smiled. "Then I shall arrive untidy. Jane's comfort matters more than appearances." And with determination, she set out on foot through fields and rain, her petticoat 6 inches deep in mud. When she finally reached Netherfield, she was tired, wet, and far from elegant, but she was exactly where she wanted to be, at her sister's side.
Elizabeth's sudden arrival at Netherfield caused quite a stir. She was muddy, tired, and not at all fashionable in appearance. The Bingley sisters whispered to each other with raised eyebrows, but Jane, pale and weak in her bed, was delighted to see her. Elizabeth stayed faithfully by her sister's side, reading to her, comforting her, and bringing cheer into the sick room. Her care and natural affection showed everyone her true character. Mr. Bingley admired Elizabeth's devotion and welcomed her warmly, though his sisters were less kind. Miss Bingley, in particular, could not resist little remarks about Elizabeth's appearance and family. "She is not very elegant, is she?" Miss Bingley whispered loudly to her sister. "Her manners are too free, and she has no style in her dress." Darcy heard these comments, but said nothing. Instead, he observed Elizabeth quietly. Though she did not have the polished beauty of other ladies, he found her eyes bright with intelligence and her spirit lively. As the days passed, Elizabeth walked through the drawing-room with calm independence, speaking her mind with honesty. She seemed unaffected by the Bingley sisters' pride, which only made her more interesting in Darcy's eyes. He was not ready to admit it, even to himself, but he began to feel something unusual: admiration. While Jane remained unwell, Mrs. Bennet decided to visit Netherfield herself. She wished to check on her daughter, of course, but even more, she wished to display her maternal concern in front of Mr. Bingley. She arrived with Kitty and Lydia, full of excitement and chatter. In Jane's room, Mrs. Bennet loudly declared, "Oh, my poor Jane, you look half dead. But what luck that you are being cared for here, in so fine a house, with such attentive company." Elizabeth blushed at her mother's words, wishing the ground would open and hide her. Downstairs, Mrs. Bennet made herself comfortable in the drawing-room with Mr. Bingley and his sisters. She could not stop praising Jane's beauty and sweetness, speaking as though her daughter's marriage was already certain. "Indeed," she said with great pride, "I have always known Jane would attract a wealthy gentleman. She is too handsome to be overlooked. My other daughters will soon follow, I am sure." Elizabeth tried to change the subject, but Mrs. Bennet only grew more talkative. Darcy, standing by the fire, listened in silence. His face revealed nothing, but Elizabeth burned with embarrassment. Lydia, meanwhile, chattered endlessly about the officers in Meryton, describing their uniforms and dances in detail. Miss Bingley exchanged amused glances with her sister, clearly judging the Bennet family as vulgar. At last, after far too long, Mrs. Bennet rose to leave, satisfied that she had displayed both her maternal affection and her high hopes.
Elizabeth sighed deeply, wishing that affection could sometimes be shown with more delicacy. Jane's illness lasted several days, so Elizabeth remained at Netherfield. In the evenings, the family gathered in the drawing room, where cards were played, music performed, and conversation flowed. Elizabeth often preferred conversation to cards, and she found herself engaged in lively discussions with Mr. Darcy. One evening, Bingley praised Elizabeth for her energy. "You are always cheerful, Miss Elizabeth. You never seem to grow tired." Elizabeth laughed. "I am not so easily fatigued. Dancing or conversation keeps me alive." Darcy, who had been listening, remarked that, "But a lady's energy should be guided by discipline. Without that, she risks being uncontrolled." Elizabeth's eyes sparkled with mischief. "And what are the qualities, Mr. Darcy, that you demand in a perfect lady? Pray enlighten us." Darcy hesitated. "She must improve her mind by reading, cultivate her taste by music, and, above all, possess an elegance of manner." Elizabeth smiled. "And to all this she must add, what, perhaps 6 hours a day of practice? Truly, I wonder that you know any woman who meets your standard." Bingley laughed heartily, enjoying Elizabeth's playful spirit. Even Darcy, though serious, could not hide a faint smile. Miss Bingley, however, grew restless. She attempted to draw Darcy's attention by praising his handwriting, asking him to write a letter in her presence. But Elizabeth continued to sparkle in conversation, and Darcy found himself listening more to her than to his hostess. Though neither of them admitted it aloud, their debates brought them closer. Elizabeth enjoyed the challenge of teasing Darcy's pride, while Darcy admired her lively mind more than he wished to confess. One evening, the conversation turned to character and faults. Elizabeth, always ready for debate, asked Mr. Darcy if he ever allowed himself to laugh at his own weaknesses. Darcy replied gravely, "I am not aware of many weaknesses, Miss Bennet, but I cannot pretend to be free from pride. I consider it a failing, though perhaps not a dishonorable one." Elizabeth tilted her head. "Pride is not always a virtue. I fear it often blinds us to reason." "True," said Darcy, "but vanity is worse. Vanity is what we think of ourselves based on the opinion of others. Pride is what we think, whether others agree or not." Elizabeth's eyes danced with amusement. "Then you must be very free of vanity, sir, for you seem little troubled by what others think of you." The company laughed at her clever remark, but Darcy remained composed. He only answered, "And you, Miss Elizabeth, are free enough of pride to enjoy mocking mine." Elizabeth smiled. Their words clashed like swords, yet both felt a spark of interest beneath the argument. At last, Jane's health improved. She could leave her bed and join the others in the drawing room, though still pale and delicate. Mr. Bingley's concern was clear. He waited on her, fetched what she needed, and spoke to her with constant gentleness. Mrs. Bennet's hopes would have soared even higher if she had been there to see it. Elizabeth, happy for her sister, also noticed something less expected. Mr. Darcy's eyes often followed her. Though he spoke little, his attention was not easily hidden. Elizabeth dismissed it with a laugh. Surely such a proud man could never admire her. When Jane was finally well enough, the two sisters returned to Longbourn. Mrs. Bennet greeted them with delight, asking 1,000 questions about Mr. Bingley's attentions. Elizabeth, however, kept her thoughts about Mr. Darcy to herself. Not long after Jane and Elizabeth returned home, a letter arrived from Mr. Collins, a distant cousin. He was the heir to Longbourn, for the estate was entailed away from the Bennet daughters.
In his letter, Mr. Collins announced his intention to visit. Mrs. Bennet was immediately curious. "Perhaps he comes to admire one of you girls. How convenient if he were to marry into the family and keep the estate among us." When Mr. Collins arrived, the Bennet family quickly discovered his character. He was tall, solemn, and excessively polite. So polite it became almost ridiculous. Every compliment was long-winded, every opinion delivered with self-importance. He spoke often of his noble patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, praising her advice on every detail of life, from the proper method of boiling vegetables to the arrangement of furniture. The Bennet girls struggled to hide their smiles, while Mr. Bennet listened with quiet amusement. Mrs. Bennet, however, was delighted. "What a fine man! So respectful, so connected. Surely one of my daughters will secure him." The stage was set for new complications as Mr. Collins prepared to make himself even more at home at Longbourn.
Mr. Collins soon displayed the full measure of his character. He was pompous in manner, long-winded in speech, and endlessly respectful to his patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh. No topic was safe from his admiration of her. If the Bennets spoke of books, he quoted Lady Catherine's opinions on reading. If dinner was served, he praised Lady Catherine's advice on proper seasoning. Mr. Bennet found endless amusement in their guest. "I must admit," he said dryly, "that our cousin is a treasure. He can speak for 10 minutes without once requiring a reply." Elizabeth, though polite, could not help smiling at his foolishness. Mrs. Bennet, however, thought him a perfect gentleman. She secretly hoped he might propose to one of her daughters and thus secure Longbourn for the family. One afternoon, as the Bennet sisters walked into Meryton, they were introduced to a new acquaintance, Mr. Wickham, a handsome young officer. Wickham was charming, graceful, and attentive. His easy manners soon won the admiration of everyone present. Even Lydia and Kitty, who were already infatuated with officers, found him especially delightful. As the group walked together, they encountered Mr. Darcy on horseback. The moment Darcy's eyes met Wickham's, both men stiffened. Darcy barely acknowledged him and rode quickly away, leaving Elizabeth astonished. What can be the meaning of this coldness? She wondered. A mystery had appeared, and she was eager to uncover it. That evening, at the home of her aunt and uncle in Meryton, Elizabeth found herself seated beside Mr. Wickham. The opportunity for conversation was too tempting to miss. Wickham spoke freely, and soon the truth, at least his version of it, was revealed. "I once expected much kindness from Mr. Darcy's late father," Wickham explained. "He promised me a living in the church, but after his death, Darcy denied me that inheritance and treated me unjustly. He has ruined my prospects, all out of jealousy and pride." Elizabeth listened with growing indignation. Could this be the same Darcy who had insulted her at the ball? Wickham's story fit perfectly with what she already believed about his character. Wickham ended with a sigh. "But I would not speak ill of him if I could avoid it. I only share this with you because you deserve the truth." Elizabeth's sympathy was complete. She saw Darcy not only as proud, but now as cruel and unjust. After Wickham's revelations, Elizabeth's opinion of Darcy hardened. Every look, every word of his seemed colored by pride and dishonor. When Jane gently suggested that Wickham's story might be exaggerated, Elizabeth shook her head. "No, Jane, you are too ready to excuse others. Darcy's behavior confirms it. He is exactly the man Wickham describes." Jane sighed, but did not argue. She wished to believe well of everyone, while Elizabeth trusted her own judgment, and Wickham's charm had made it easy to trust him. Elizabeth now felt a mixture of dislike and curiosity towards Darcy. She enjoyed mocking him, yet his presence always seemed to disturb her in ways she could not fully explain. At last, the much-anticipated Netherfield ball arrived. The Bennets entered with excitement, But the evening soon proved less than perfect. Mrs. Bennet, in her eagerness, spoke far too loudly about Jane's prospects with Bingley, making Elizabeth blush with embarrassment. Lydia and Kitty giggled and flirted with the officers without restraint. Mary, determined to shine, performed a long and tedious song, ignoring her sister's silent pleas for Marcy. In the midst of this, Mr. Darcy surprised Elizabeth by asking her to dance. Reluctantly, she accepted. Their steps across the floor were graceful, but their conversation was sharp. Elizabeth teased him about his pride, while Darcy defended his reserve. He hinted at deeper feelings, though his words remained guarded. Elizabeth, half amused and half irritated, found herself strangely unsettled. Darcy, for his part, admired her spirit even while she challenged him. The evening ended in confusion. Mrs. Bennet's boasting had made the family appear ridiculous. Jane's happiness seemed uncertain, and Elizabeth was left with questions she could not answer about Mr. Darcy.
The day after Mr. Collins's long visit, Elizabeth found herself alone with him in the drawing room. She had expected dull conversation, but what followed was far worse, an actual proposal of marriage. "Miss Elizabeth," Mr. Collins began, bowing stiffly, "it has occurred to me that I ought to make a proper offer of marriage. As you are aware, I am the heir to Longbourn, and it is my duty to secure a wife. A suitable wife, naturally." Elizabeth blinked. You wish to marry me, Mr. Collins?" "Precisely," he said, spreading his hands. "Consider the advantages. I am a clergyman, appointed by the admirable Lady Catherine de Bourgh, whose judgment is unsurpassed. I have a comfortable home, an income sufficient for any prudent lady, and a character beyond reproach. You could do much worse, Miss Elizabeth." Elizabeth, polite but firm, shook her head. "I am flattered, sir, but I cannot accept. We are not suited. Nonsense, nonsense," he interrupted quickly, his voice full of righteous certainty. "Suitability is of little consequence. A lady of your accomplishments and manners would be the perfect partner. Surely your sense of duty and propriety must compel you to accept." Elizabeth could hardly keep her composure. "But, Mr. Collins, I must confess I do not feel affection for you. Marriage without affection would make me most unhappy." Mr. Collins gasped in mock horror. "Unhappy, Miss Elizabeth? This is preposterous. Lady Catherine would never approve of a refusal. Surely you wish to please your elders." Elizabeth smiled faintly, though her cheeks flushed. "I do respect Lady Catherine greatly, sir, but I must also respect myself." Mr. Collins's jaw tightened, but he recovered quickly. "You are young, perhaps foolish. I am certain that in time you will change your mind. But I shall not abandon hope." Elizabeth laughed inwardly, thinking how absurdly serious this proud, pompous man truly was. His speech, his manner, even his self-importance were almost too ridiculous to bear, but she remained polite. "Then I must decline," she said firmly, "with gratitude for your consideration, but without hope of changing my mind." Mr. Collins's face twisted with shock and offense, but he bowed again. "Very well, Miss Elizabeth. I shall take my leave, but know that I am patient and persistent. Fortune may favor my proposal eventually." Elizabeth let him depart, shaking her head with quiet amusement. She could not help thinking how strange it was that a man so absurdly serious could take himself so seriously. As soon as he left, Elizabeth laughed softly. "He is ridiculous, and yet he takes himself so seriously. One cannot help but wonder how the world will endure him." After Mr. Collins's long, pompous proposal, Elizabeth felt both amusement and determination. "Mr. Collins," she said firmly, "I am grateful for your offer, but I cannot accept it. I wish to marry only for affection.
Marriage without it would make me unhappy." Mr. Collins gasped, as if she had committed a great offense. "Unhappy, Miss Elizabeth? Surely you cannot refuse a man of my character, fortune, and connections? Lady Catherine herself would consider you foolish." Elizabeth held her ground. "I respect Lady Catherine, but I must respect myself. My happiness is also important." Mrs. Bennet, overhearing the conversation, burst into indignation. "Elizabeth, how can you refuse such a fine man? Think of your sisters. Think of our family. You are being absurd and ungrateful." Elizabeth smiled politely. "Mother, I am aware of your wishes, but I cannot marry without love. I must choose for myself." Mr. Collins looked wounded, but he nodded stiffly. "Very well, Miss Elizabeth. I shall withdraw for now, though I hope your mind may change." As he left, Elizabeth laughed quietly to herself. Ridiculous man, yet so serious about every absurd word he utters. Just as Jane began to recover from her illness, news arrived that Mr. Bingley was leaving for London, unexpectedly and without explanation. Jane's face turned pale. "How sudden! I have only just begun to know him properly." Elizabeth tried to comfort her sister. "Perhaps he has urgent business in the city, but we shall see him again soon." Mrs. Bennet, however, was frantic. How can he leave? He was meant to admire Jane, to dance with her, to— Oh, I cannot bear it. This is a terrible disappointment. Elizabeth observed something troubling. Darcy, too, was about to depart with Bingley. She suspected his influence had played a role in Bingley's sudden decision. Frustration and anger surged in her mind. Jane sighed softly, trying to remain calm. "We cannot know all that occurs in London. Let us hope for a letter or news soon." Elizabeth frowned. "I will not trust him. Darcy is proud, and he may already be shaping events to suit his own ideas." Shortly after Mr. Collins's proposal was rejected, news spread that Charlotte Lucas had accepted him. Elizabeth was astonished. "Charlotte? You accepted that ridiculous man?" Charlotte smiled calmly. "Yes, Elizabeth. I am not romantic like you. I cannot afford to wait for love that may never come. Mr. Collins offers security, a home, and a comfortable life. That is enough for me." Elizabeth shook her head, trying to understand. "But you will be married to— such absurdity." Charlotte shrugged. "Better absurdity with comfort than loneliness without it. Marriage is a practical matter, not always romantic one." Elizabeth admired her friend's sense and reasoning, even as she quietly vowed never to follow the same path. Elizabeth could not stop thinking about Charlotte's decision. She admired her friend's intelligence and courage in choosing security, but she was also shocked. "Marriage for convenience," she muttered. "I cannot imagine it. Love, affection, respect, surely they matter most." Yet she understood Charlotte's choice. In a society where women had few options, securing a stable home was sensible, even if it lacked romance. Elizabeth resolved to respect her friend, even if she disagreed. "I shall never marry without love, but I see now why Charlotte chooses differently. Prudence can be its own kind of wisdom." Though shocked, Elizabeth felt a growing maturity. Life was more complicated than she had imagined, and people's choices were not always easy to judge. The news came quietly, but struck with force. Mr. Bingley had left for London and would remain there for the winter. Jane read the letter twice, her hand trembling slightly. She forced a gentle smile. It seems he has important matters in town. Perhaps he will return in the spring. Elizabeth studied her sister's face. Dearest Jane, you speak calmly, but your eyes tell another story. I cannot forgive him for leaving so suddenly. And Darcy, yes, I am sure Darcy persuaded him. Jane shook her head. Lizzie, you must not judge too quickly. Mr. Bingley is an honorable man. If he truly cares for me, he will return. Elizabeth sighed. You always look for the best, but I think men are not always so noble. Bingley is good-natured, yes, but he may be too easily guided by Darcy's pride. Mrs. Bennet, overhearing, began pacing furiously. What a disaster! My poor Jane! All that effort, all those smiles, wasted. I was certain we would see a wedding before spring. Oh, how cruel men are! Jane tried to soothe her mother. Please, Mamma, do not be upset. I am not broken-hearted. I will hope for better days. Elizabeth admired Jane's courage, but knew the wound ran deep. Jane's disappointment was hidden beneath her calm manner, yet Elizabeth felt a quiet anger growing against Mr. Darcy. The Gardiners, Jane and Elizabeth's sensible aunt and uncle, soon arrived from London. Mrs. Gardiner, kind and observant, quickly noticed Jane's pale cheeks and gentle sighs. My dear Jane, you have been too quiet. I suspect your spirits are low. Will you come with us to London? A change of air and company will do you good. Jane hesitated. I do not wish to appear foolish, running to London when Mr. Bingley is there. If he cares for me, he will come on his own. Mrs. Gardiner smiled warmly. You are wise, child. But you shall come as my guest, not as a pursuer. London is large. You will enjoy yourself regardless. Elizabeth joined in. Yes, Jane, and you will be with people who truly love and value you. If Bingley is worthy, he will find you there. Mrs. Gardiner then turned to Elizabeth with a raised eyebrow. And you, Lizzie, what if this Mr. Wickham I hear so much about? He seems charming, perhaps too charming. Elizabeth laughed lightly. Do not fear, Aunt. I like him very well, but I will not lose my head. I have no fortune, and Wickham has no wealth. I know my situation. Good, said Mrs. Gardiner. Charm is pleasant, but character is more important. Remember that. Elizabeth promised to take her aunt's advice seriously, though in her heart she still enjoyed Wickham's company more than she admitted. For some weeks, Wickham continued to seek Elizabeth's company, flattering her with easy conversation. But then a new figure appeared, Miss King, who had just inherited £10,000. Suddenly, his attentions drifted toward her. He complimented her, walked with her, and smiled at her with the same charm Elizabeth once thought unique. Elizabeth watched with a raised brow. So, his heart is very flexible. It bends where money grows. Charlotte wrote in a letter, Do not be surprised, Lizzie. A man must think of his future. Wickham has little fortune. Miss King offers security. Elizabeth replied, half amused, half disappointed. Practical, perhaps, but I see now he is not so romantic as he pretended. His story about Darcy may not be false, but I must accept he is not the hero I imagined. Still, she told herself she felt no heartbreak. Wickham had entertained her, nothing more, but she could not ignore the lesson. Charm can disguise selfishness. In March, Elizabeth prepared for her journey to Kent with Sir William Lucas and his daughter Maria. She looked forward to seeing her friend, though she was curious and slightly nervous about how Charlotte managed life with her husband Collins. As the carriage rattled along, she kept her companions cheerful with witty remarks. I expect Mr. Collins will show us every corner of his parsonage with the pride of a king displaying a palace. Maria giggled. He already described the chimney in his letter. Imagine how he will praise it in person. Elizabeth smiled. "We must be patient. It is Charlotte who deserves our attention, not her husband." But in quiet moments, her thoughts returned to Darcy and Wickham. She frowned, watching the countryside pass by. Darcy is proud and severe, yet I see he may not be as cruel as Wickham painted him, and Wickham, so smooth, yet so quick to chase wealth. Perhaps I have been too hasty in my judgments. The journey was long, but Elizabeth's lively spirit never allowed gloom to settle. She was eager to see her friend, curious about Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and, though she would not admit it, secretly wondering if Darcy might somehow appear again in her life. Elizabeth arrived at Hunsford with Sir William and Maria. Charlotte welcomed them warmly, showing them the small but tidy parsonage. Elizabeth was pleased to see that her friend had created a comfortable home. Charlotte seemed cheerful, though Elizabeth could see that her life with Mr. Collins was calm rather than exciting. Mr. Collins, meanwhile, filled every moment with speeches. He praised his house, his garden, his position, and above all, Lady Catherine de Bourgh. "Her taste is perfect," he repeated often, "and we owe all our happiness to her advice." Elizabeth smiled politely, but could not help laughing inside. She admired Charlotte's patience. Her friend accepted Mr. Collins's foolishness calmly and kept her household in order. Elizabeth thought, "Charlotte has chosen security over romance. I respect her choice, but I could never live such a life myself." The day came when Elizabeth was to meet the famous Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Mr. Collins had spoken of her every hour since Elizabeth's arrival, praising her wisdom, elegance, and authority, until Maria and Sir William grew tired of hearing her name. Elizabeth, curious and amused, looked forward to meeting the woman who inspired such devotion. In the afternoon, Mr. Collins announced proudly, "My dear guests, today we are invited to dine at Rosings Park. You will soon see the great kindness of Lady Catherine. I beg you to observe her every word carefully, for she speaks with unmatched authority. Truly, to be noticed by her is an honor beyond price." Maria Lucas looked nervous. "Do you think she will be very grand? I have never dined in such a place before." Elizabeth smiled, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Fear not, Maria. If Lady Catherine speaks as much as Mr. Collins does, we may not need to answer at all." Charlotte, calm and practical, gently reminded her, "Lizzie, do be cautious. My husband is very proud of his connection. Let us not laugh too openly." At last, the small party set out for Rosings. As they approached, Elizabeth could not deny the house's grandeur. It stood tall and handsome, surrounded by fine gardens. Mr. Collins' pride nearly burst from him as he pointed out every detail. "Observe the number of windows, the chimney stacks, the symmetry of the architecture. Lady Catherine herself oversees all improvements. You will see, Miss Elizabeth, nothing escapes her excellent judgment." Elizabeth replied politely, though inside she thought, if Lady Catherine truly manages every brick and shrub, she must have little else to do. They were shown into a large drawing room where Lady Catherine sat in a grand chair, as if upon a throne. Beside her was her daughter, Miss de Bourgh, a thin, sickly young lady who barely raised her eyes. Mr. Collins bowed so deeply he nearly fell forward. "Your ladyship, may I present my friends, Sir William Lucas, his daughter Maria, and Miss Elizabeth Bennet. They are most grateful for your condescension in receiving them." Lady Catherine gave them a cold nod. "I am glad to see you. Pray, be seated." The visitors sat, and Mr. Collins quickly began praising the furniture, the curtains, even the fireplace, until Lady Catherine silenced him with a glance. Turning her sharp eyes on Elizabeth, she said, "You are one of 5 sisters, I hear. Your mother has no sons?" "No, madam. Elizabeth replied calmly. "Dear me, how unfortunate! And all 5 daughters brought up at home? Not one sent to London or a governess employed?" Elizabeth answered with composure, "We were educated by our mother and our own reading, madam. We each pursued what interested us most." Lady Catherine sniffed. "That is highly irregular. A young woman should have a governess. What are your accomplishments?" Elizabeth, amused, replied, "I cannot boast of many. I play the piano a little and read when I can, but I do not pretend to great skill." Lady Catherine frowned. "Every young woman should practice music for hours every day. My own daughter would have been an excellent performer had she only had the strength." Elizabeth glanced at the pale Miss de Bourgh, who looked too weak even to sit upright. She thought, perhaps practice was not the real obstacle. At dinner, the table groaned under the weight of fine dishes. Mr. Collins could hardly eat for all his compliments. "Such excellent soup, Lady Catherine, such noble poultry. Your ladyship's taste is truly divine." Lady Catherine accepted his words as natural, then turned again to Elizabeth. "Do you draw?" "No, madam. Do any of your sisters?" Elizabeth smiled. "Not with much success." Lady Catherine gave a sharp nod. "It is a pity. Daughters should be trained in all useful accomplishments: music, drawing, sewing, household management. Young women must always be occupied. Are you skilled in needlework?" "Not highly, madam, but I have often enjoyed it." Lady Catherine leaned back, her voice loud and commanding. "Then you must improve. Daughters of gentlemen should never be idle. I have no patience with laziness." Elizabeth, trying not to laugh, bowed her head politely. Mr. Bourgh spoke not a word. Elizabeth pitied her, though she noticed that Lady Catherine constantly interrupted her attempts at speech, as if to show even her daughter must be silent before her. After dinner, when the ladies withdrew to the drawing-room, Lady Catherine resumed her questions. "Your father's estate is entailed, is it not? It will pass to Mr. Collins." "Yes, madam," Elizabeth said calmly. "Very bad business. Your mother should have done more. 5 daughters, no fortune, very badly planned indeed. I suppose you must all marry quickly, or live miserably." Elizabeth answered with quiet dignity, "We hope to be happy, madam, whether married or not." Lady Catherine gave a sharp laugh. "Nonsense. Happiness for a young woman is only in marriage. And pray, what is your age?" Elizabeth replied, smiling, "I am not yet 21. "Indeed. Well, you are old enough to know better than to speak so lightly of serious matters. You must marry, and when you marry, you must marry well." Elizabeth gave a small curtsy. "I thank you for your advice, madam." By the time they left Rosings, Maria was pale with nervousness, Sir William was full of admiration, and Mr. Collins can hardly contain his joy. Was not she gracious? Was not she magnificent? To be in her presence is to be elevated above ordinary life. Elizabeth, however, was laughing softly to herself. Magnificent, indeed, but perhaps not in the way Mr. Collins imagines. I believe Lady Catherine loves nothing so well as her own voice. Charlotte smiled quietly. "Yes, but, Lizzie, you must admit she provides entertainment, and she does keep Mr. Collins occupied." Elizabeth agreed. For all Lady Catherine's pride and Mr. Collins' ridiculous flattery, the evening had not been dull. On the contrary, it had been one of the most amusing she had ever spent. Elizabeth's days at Hunsford passed in calm routine. She walked in the gardens, read her books, and listened with amusement as Mr. Collins praised Lady Catherine from dawn till dusk. Charlotte managed her household wisely, gently guiding her husband when his speeches grew too absurd. But one afternoon brought a surprise. Mr. Collins burst into the room, almost out of breath. His face shone with pride. "My dear ladies, the family from Rosings has arrived. Lady Catherine's nephews are here, Mr. Darcy and Colonel Fitzwilliam. What an honor! How gracious of her ladyship to bring them at this very time." Elizabeth's book nearly slipped from her hand. Darcy? She had not expected to see him again so soon. Her heart gave a strange little leap, half annoyance, half curiosity. Charlotte raised her eyebrows and gave Elizabeth a knowing smile. "Well, Lizzie, this will make Hunsford less dull, at least." Elizabeth replied lightly, "Yes, though I suspect Mr. Darcy will think our society too small for his notice." That evening, Mr. Collins could barely contain his delight when an invitation arrived from Rosings. "Lady Catherine commands our presence for dinner," he announced proudly. "Her condescension is beyond measure." Elizabeth prepared herself, half eager, half uneasy. When they entered Lady Catherine's great drawing room, Elizabeth looked around quickly. Lady Catherine sat in her throne-like chair, Miss de Bourgh pale and silent beside her. But Elizabeth's eyes soon found him, Mr. Darcy, tall, serious, and composed as ever. Near him stood his cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam, whose open, friendly smile immediately set everyone at ease. Mr. Collins nearly bowed himself to the ground. "Your ladyship, what a privilege, what kindness!" Lady Catherine waved her hand as if silencing a child, then turned her sharp gaze on the guests. Elizabeth caught Darcy's eyes for a moment. He looked at her with something she could not read. Was it surprise? Was it interest? He quickly turned away. Colonel Fitzwilliam began to speak with easy good humor, asking Elizabeth about her stay in Kent. She found him lively and pleasant, a cheerful contrast to Darcy's stiff silence. Lady Catherine, meanwhile, interrogated everyone, barely letting them answer. She demanded to know how many sisters Elizabeth had, what accomplishments they possessed, and whether they played or drew or spoke French. Elizabeth replied with calm politeness, but her eyes often sparkled with secret amusement. Darcy sat quiet through most of this, yet Elizabeth noticed his eyes resting on her whenever she spoke. When dinner ended and the party rose to leave, Darcy suddenly stepped toward her. "Miss Bennet, I hope your family is well." Elizabeth gave a small curtsy. "They are, thank you." A silence followed, long enough for 100 words, but none came. Darcy bowed stiffly and turned away. Elizabeth bit her lip to keep from laughing. "So, this is the proud Darcy, who once declared me barely tolerable? He can hardly manage a sentence to me now." The next morning, Elizabeth walked along a little path near Hunsford. She enjoyed these moments of freedom, away from Mr. Collins's speeches. Suddenly she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Darcy himself. He bowed. "Miss Bennet." I replied, "Mr. Darcy." They walked on together in awkward silence, until he said, "Do you often walk here?" I answered, "Yes, it is a pleasant path, and I disturb no one here." Darcy glanced at her, puzzled at such an odd remark. To change the subject, she asked after his sister. Darcy replied she was well, and added, a little hesitantly, that Miss Georgiana often spoke of your kindness at Pemberley. Elizabeth was surprised. He has spoken of me to his sister? But before she could respond, Colonel Fitzwilliam appeared, cheerful as always, and the conversation turned light again. Darcy walked beside them, silent once more, until they returned to the parsonage. Elizabeth told herself not to think about the meeting, but she could not help it. Why was Darcy seeking her company? Why had he looked at her so strangely? The next day brought another surprise. As Elizabeth sat with Charlotte in the little sitting room, a knock was heard. Mr. Collins hurried to the door, returned pale with excitement, and announced, "Mr. Darcy, madam." Darcy entered, bowed, and sat down, without saying why he had come. Charlotte, polite and curious, began a conversation, but Darcy answered briefly, often glancing at Elizabeth. Elizabeth tried not to laugh. He looked as if he wished to speak to her, yet could not. The silence grew heavy until at last he rose, bowed again, and left. As soon as the door closed, Mr. Collins exclaimed, "What a great honor! Mr. Darcy himself in my humble parsonage! Charlotte, my dear, you must write to your family of this distinction at once." Elizabeth, however, whispered to Charlotte, "Why did he come at all? He said hardly 3 words." Charlotte, more observant, said thoughtfully, "I think he came to see you, Lizzie." Elizabeth laughed aloud. "To see me? Impossible. He dislikes me too much. More likely he wished to study the chimney or inspect the furniture." But Charlotte only smiled knowingly. The following day Darcy returned, and the next. Each time he sat quietly, speaking little, often staring at Elizabeth, then leaving as suddenly as he came. Elizabeth grew puzzled and amused. He comes, he sits, he says nothing. What is the purpose of such visits? Charlotte replied, "I suspect his purpose is you, Lizzie, though he hardly knows how to show it." Elizabeth shook her head. "Surely not. If he wished to please me, he would speak more than 10 words at a time." Yet, though she mocked him, she could not deny a strange curiosity each time he entered the room. Colonel Fitzwilliam, in contrast, visited often and spoke freely. He was lively, open, and talkative, everything Darcy was not. Elizabeth enjoyed his company, and she could see Darcy watching them sometimes, with an expression she could not quite understand. At night, Elizabeth thought over these unexpected events. She remembered Darcy's proud manners at Netherfield, his silent judgment at the Meryton Assembly, and Wickham's bitter tales. And now, here he was, seeking her company, though he could hardly express himself. "What can it mean?" she thought. "Does he wish to laugh at me? Or, no, that is too absurd. Could he admire me?" The thought made her laugh aloud, yet she could not put it out of her mind. One evening, as Darcy left the parsonage after another silent visit, Elizabeth turned to Charlotte. "There goes our noble guest again, without one clear reason for coming. Truly, I cannot guess his intentions." Charlotte smiled wisely. "Lizzie, you will not understand him if you only look for pride. Sometimes even the proudest man may be uncertain of his own feelings." Elizabeth shook her head, unconvinced. "Then I fear he will never be clear, either to himself or to anyone else." Yet, deep in her heart, she began to wonder. And so, Elizabeth's stay at Hunsford grew far less dull than she had expected. Each day brought Darcy's unexpected presence, sometimes at Rosings, sometimes on her walks, sometimes at the parsonage, each time leaving her with more questions than answers. One morning, Elizabeth went for a walk and met Colonel Fitzwilliam, Mr. Darcy's cousin. He was cheerful and easy to talk to, unlike Darcy, who was always serious. "Miss Bennet," he said, "I hope you are enjoying Kent. The countryside here is lovely, is it not?" "Yes, very much," Elizabeth replied. "Charlotte manages her home well, and the walks are delightful." The colonel looked at her kindly. "You must know the truth about Darcy and Bingley. Bingley is good-hearted but easily influenced by Darcy. That is why he left Netherfield suddenly. Darcy thinks he acts for Bingley's best interest, but sometimes he misjudges others' feelings." Elizabeth frowned. "So Darcy's pride can hurt others, even if he means well?" "Exactly," Fitzwilliam said. "Darcy admires intelligence, honesty, and spirit. He is proud and reserved, but he is honorable. You must judge him carefully, not by appearances or gossip." Elizabeth nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Perhaps I have been too quick to believe Wickham's story." The colonel smiled. Pride and prejudice can cloud judgment, but you are clever and fair-minded. You will understand him better soon enough." Elizabeth walked on, pondering his words. She realized that her opinion of Darcy might need to change, though she was not yet sure how she felt about him.